In part one of this series, we touched on the cultural climate and childhood of Pedro López as he grew up in Colombia, tracing influences from just months before his birth to his release from prison at 23 years old. In part two, we followed Pedro's journey as he settled down in Peru, where he began honing the horrors of his darkest desires while claiming the lives of nearly 100 victims, narrowly escaping retribution in the end. This week, in part three, we'll conclude this series, but in no way will we find closure. This is Pedro López Part 3, Graves of the Monster. I didn't see you there.
Something big is going on here.
From hunting ghosts to Bigfoot,
paranormal, UFOs, true crime, and more.
We won't just be spouting articles.
I was researching for your entertainment.
The beginning of a new world.
The best guac you'll ever fucking eat.
True story.
It's basically like one day you walk outside and you see that the ants are playing with matches.
This is the Black Cat Report.
See you on the other side.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 73 of the Black Cat Report. My name is Gil, and joining me this week, as always, is the one and only reigning junior bocce ball champion of Culpeper County, fresh from the competition, Joey.
You know what's sad is I didn't retain my title this year. Some young kids just beat me, you know?
Did they finally stop paying attention to all the bomb threats that you were calling in?
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to talk about that on air, but thanks for outing me because Junior Bocce Ball new champion actually is listening to this, and he was supposed to have been there the last few years, but...
I didn't know your dad listens to the show.
Oh, he does, actually.
Damn
he
it.
literally went through and was like, who is Pedro López yesterday? And I was like, well, let me tell you.
Oh, let me tell you something.
Boop, and then I turned on Black Cat Report.
If you stopped learning so much about Pedro and started paying more attention to your balls, maybe this Thanksgiving would be less awkward. No.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you saw the liquor in my parents' house that I sent to you on posted on the Instagram as a happy Thanksgiving. That was stuff that my parents don't even drink. So here we are.
They just kept feeding it to you, trying to get you, quote unquote, ready for the competition. It was a trap.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was close.
Some bullshit. Yeah. Some bullshit, really. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I want to recount. Anyways, so on our last episode, Pedro López had already raped and murdered nearly 100 little girls before being captured by the community, then freed by a Christian missionary who drove him to the Peruvian border and allowed him to walk across into Ecuador. After that, it would be years before enough breadcrumbs about Pedro's life can be picked up and the dots connected. What we do know is that he never slowed down. He continued to travel between countries and fill mass graves with the victims of his lust for rape and murder. From the rural countryside to large cities, he only stayed long enough to claim a dozen or so victims before packing up and moving on to a new town. And that's right, I did say only a dozen or so victims.
Yeah, it's nothing compared to before.
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, Pedro's story picks back up in April of 1979 as he made his way to Ambato, Ecuador. Nestled in a valley between the high Andes Mountains, Ambato is a mid-sized modern city and the capital of its province, whose name I will not try to pronounce. Think Portland in the 1990s or Olympia, Washington in the early 2000s. On May 5th, 1979, Pedro approached 11-year-old Hortensia Garces Lozada, who was selling newspapers at an intersection downtown Ambato, Ecuador. With her mother pregnant and unable to work, Hortensia's family was struggling to make ends meet, meaning anyone who could find employment had to. This made Pedro's offer to pay her 100 sucres, about $18 today, if she would be his guide around the city that much more tempting. She happily accepted, and Pedro went on to lead her to the edge of town where he took her underneath a busy bridge below a highway and spent hours raping and beating her before finally strangling her to death. When he was done with her, he threw her body into a ditch near one of the bridge's pillars and covered her with the newspapers she had been carrying around all day. When night fell and Hortensia still hadn't returned home, her father grew worried and went out looking for her to no avail. And In line with the social neglect referenced in parts 1 and 2 of the series, when he reported Hortensa's disappearance to local police, they gave the same response to Leonidas, Hortensa's father, as they had been giving to the parents of the dozens of other girls recently reported missing. To the police, it was an open and shut case. All these little girls were just runaways who, and I'm quoting now from the editor of a local newspaper, quote, ran away because they were failing in school, end quote. Nice work, Johnson. Another open and shut case.
God, I think that if Leonidas had gotten to him, he would have been like, "This is Ecuador," and kicked him in the... No? Okay, it didn't.
It was really sad though. Like they had actually like a lot of footage of Leonidas like talking about everything around his daughter, and like it completely fucked up his life. Even
for sure.
And this is like 1979. He was talking about it in the interview, and I think like 2001, 2002. He was still like visibly devastated, like very
for sure.
visibly
And I wonder
devastated.
if he ever heard about them, St. Karen letting them go. If that was the thing that the later victims heard about, you know?
I have no clue. I hope she's hiding in Jamaica. That's all I can say. Cause
With Jerry.
But yeah, God, dude, I hate her so much. I hate her so much because I know where things are going, and like I know what all happens and stuff, and it's just like, you fucking piece of shit. Anyways, well, shortly after Hortensa's disappearance, a flash flood raised the waters of a major river near Ambato. In the aftermath, the bodies of 4 little girls were discovered, forcing local authorities and media to go into high alert. But with no information on the children's identities due to ignoring reports and no suspects to point to, all anyone could do was remain vigilant and wait. It was basically a moment where the cop said, "Oh shit, I guess there's something going on. Do you remember the names of those parents of those kids? No? Damn. Well, next time we should write them down." Like that basically is what happened.
Wow. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love the care that's put into this.
Well, by 1980, months had passed and still no suspects were announced for the missing children. So life went on in Ambato as initial fears and anxieties gave way to the needed routines of daily life, something that honestly is so quintessentially human. You know, we deal with some sort of large social threat, some kind of anxiety or stress. And after a little while, it just kind of becomes normal and people hop back into a routine. Like humans really need that.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to be thinking about somebody disrupting your life every day. You don't want to be like, oh my God, every single day thinking about someone stealing your kids. Though you kind of do if you're a parent, I guess. You do, but I feel like they kind of have to be like, okay, maybe at that time has passed. Maybe there's something happening. Even if it's happening still, you're just like, oh, it's fine. It hasn't happened to my kid yet. You know, I think that's kind of like like you're saying they need that routine to keep going.
Yeah.
Or else, you fall apart.
Yeah. And, you know, just on a very practical level, in a fucked up way, life has to go on. You know, people have to get back to their jobs, to their schedules. Kids have to go to school or help them out with, you know, whatever the occupations are that the parents are doing or any number of things. But like, there's only so many weeks that can go by before like they're just like, well, nothing's happened. I guess it's okay to go back out. I'll keep an eye on you. You know, like this is normal.
Yep.
Well, as was the case on the morning of February 14th, when Carlos Jacome, a well-known, well-respected baker in town, stood outside of his offices, waiting for his daughter, 9-year-old Eva Nova Jacome, to deliver his lunch as she did most days. But as the hours passed, his panic grew, and Carlos began searching, tracing the route that Eva would normally walk every day from their home to his office. With no sign of her anywhere, Carlos immediately reported his daughter missing to the police, who then quickly issued bulletins and alerted the press. In other words, because Carlos was actually well off and known, they responded. And that's not just my opinion. Almost everyone openly said that in interviews, like
Mm-hmm.
in a somewhat awkward way, while they were covering the case around like Eva. All of the other victims' families were talking about how the government, the police, the institutions only pay attention to the rich. They only care about the rich. The media doesn't pay attention to it. They're basically just saying over and over again how ignored they are and how like stomped on they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would get to Carlos, and it would be a totally different tone. He's like, "Well, I hope that they look into this." And it was just like, oh, okay, this is an obvious disparity here. Like everybody.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this led to news of the other missing girls to spread after the media began publishing stories that basically said, oh, wait, there's other girls missing like Eva? Maybe they're related. Like, this is the same thing that news does all the time. You know, when there's like a hot button subject or event and the media wants to keep the ball rolling. So all of a sudden they start talking about anything that might be related. Like all of a sudden they're experts on all of this stuff that had been going on for months. They just never reported on before.
Yeah, they investigate.
Mm-hmm. They were like, well, oh shit, you know, Jay-Z had a blue lemonade soda. Well, oh my God, so did J-Lo. Like, you know, like they always just, there's a pattern here. And like, they're just trying to keep the paper selling, to keep people's eyes glued to the television. It's exactly what happened. But there is the benefit of the fact that now these other cases started to come to light.
Yeah. Now there's eyes on things too, which is important.
Exactly. And that's what happened. These children were still just an afterthought, emotional fodder for the legitimacy of the father's story, of Carlos's story. But regardless of the reason, these cases were finally reaching the ears of the communities being preyed upon, right? This is kind of the first time that this has happened on a large scale in relation to what Pedro had been doing.
Yeah, and I also want to say, too, that he's doing these things in between different years in completely different countries. So they're not sharing information. It's kind of like in the 70s when the U.S. states were not sharing information about serial killers. Same idea. The countries down there not sharing information. There's no Interpol is not at this moment, like we did say in last episode, I think, is not looking for him. You know, so he's sitting there going, "Oh, I can just flip a country to another country and be okay and do it again because there's no MO for him."
Yeah, and honestly, he was completely right. You know, between the very specific communities that he targeted, the reasons why he targeted those communities, and the borders that he crossed, you know, like it or hate it, it worked. Like it worked for him 100%. Yep. You know, well, on March 8th, just 22 days after Eva's disappearance, local reporters knocked on the door of Carlos's home. They were sent to let him know the police had just discovered a little girl's body in a wooden shack on a farm just outside of town. He quickly rushed to the address of the morgue, holding the body, and despite his hopes, was soon staring at his lifeless daughter. The next day, newspapers notified everyone about the girl's death and began warning readers to keep an eye out. This is an important note here. The police still had no leads as to who was behind the murders. They had no idea.
Yeah, it's about time for them to do what the other country did, where the group of kids were just like, let's just have a little pot out there, a little kid out there, and try to trap him into this. Just like it, and literally the first person they did that to, it was like, boom, got him.
I'm just a little girl.
I'm just a little girl. Yeah. Had the big brawny guy out there sitting there in his little skirt with a little lollipop, being like, "Oh, I'm just a little girl. I'm just walking to get my family stuff."
Oh no, where did my mom go?
Yes.
Well, just days after this, Pedro was walking around Plaza Urbana, a large market in central Ambato. All day long, he was pacing back and forth through this market, pretending to be selling small trinkets, random knickknacks like padlocks and sunglasses. Like, really, it was just a bunch of random shit. Like, he was literally being that guy in a trench coat who, like, opens it up and shows you 100 random things for sale. Like, that was him, right?
I always buy stuff from this.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I do too. Like, every time. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like next time they open their trench coat, there's going to be nothing under there, and you just got to You know, you gotta
Well, that's your
give them
bonus
pretty
for
much what they
your purchase.
want. Yeah, I'm sure.
So yeah, no, but of course this was all a front. He was actually stalking 11-year-old Alicia Ramon, who was there helping her mother, Carlina Ramon, a hot foods vendor in the plaza. All day long, Pedro weaved in and out of the busy crowds, staring at Alicia. Hours passed, and his patience thinned. Soon, Pedro started giving himself small concessions, just, little things here and there as he was stalking her. I mean, again, like
popcorn?
Yeah, kind of like that. But to go back to what the mother had said, right, about that day was that he was there from the time that all the vendors were actually like setting up the booths in the morning.
He was stalking, in the morning.
And this all kind of comes to a head at like 4 p.m. So like he had been there for like
8
10,
hours.
11, maybe 12 hours,
Dude, this guy's working overtime.
Yeah, and
yeah, he's going to OT.
I didn't even include it in here because like there's just so much to go over in this, but there were quotes by him where he talked about like stalking like his targets, right? For literal days. Like he would go for freaking days just waiting for the right moment. Like I said, he started giving himself small concessions, regularly going up to their table, picking up, the lids of the food, then bending down, pretending to smell it while using the lid as cover to gaze at Alicia.
He was like pretending he's working there?
No, well, just like another merchant in the market, but like kind of somebody that's like not officially licensed and just kind of like selling shit.
Oh, so when you like said he came over and like picked up some stuff, I thought like he was like picking up food from the table, like as like a waiter, waitress.
No,
like, being just
no.
like, no, don't look at me, I'm just a weird guy in like a trench coat with picking up somebody's food. It's like tasting it,
just like talking into his collar. Table 7. All right, I'll be right there. Yep. I gotta take this. I gotta take this.
Just runs out of the mall.
Yeah, so this is like, and this is actually important too. Like, it's a large outdoor market with like a cover over the top of it, right? And the little girl and the mom, they're at a hot food vending table, just kind of in one of the central areas of the market. And so, picture all these like pots and pans all the way around their table, completely, 360 around it, and they all have lids on it. And Pedro's going up to these and pretending to be interested in the food. He's lifting up the lid like he's smelling it or like he's looking at it. But what he's actually doing is using the lid as he's bending down to block the mom's view of him staring straight at Alicia. It's so fucking creepy. Like, picturing, I don't know, for me when I was reading through this, like I was picturing myself in like her shoes. And like, other than the fact that they're too small for me, like that was a bad joke. Other than the fact that they're too small for me,
yes.
How fucking creepy would it be to be like that size in life and to know that an adult's doing some shit like this to you?
I want to say that I just imagine Mr. Bean sitting there with the lid over top, going to the parents and doing that little like the eyebrow thing to the girl.
Don't
I imagine that's what he was
the name
doing.
of Mr. Bean.
Well, not Mr. Bean didn't actually do it. This is Mr. Lopez doing it,
Well, yeah, obviously.
I would imagine he has some hijinks like Mr. Bean. He like skedaddles away. That's how he was acting in those places. Because, I mean, that's very Mr. Bean-like. Just very, like, serial killer Mr. Bean.
Still one of the greatest moments in history. Just history, fake or real, right? Which at this point in time, there's a fine line between the two, is when Mr. Bean has to, like, park downtown. And it's like outside of a government building, shit tons of traffic. And there's like obviously no parking in a good spot. So parks his car and gets a fake pair of like legs out of his trunk and then walks up and sets it underneath the front of his car with like a wrench on the ground next to it and then just fucking walks away. So it looks like somebody's working on his car.
That's genius.
It's so good. That shit lives in my head rent free. Like that's a survival tip. Right there. Like, I love Mr. Bean.
Surviving in the city. I mean, my favorite was still the movie when he was flipping everybody else off driving down the street because he thought that meant like hello or hello. I forgot what. I think he thought it meant hello.
God, I fucking love that. I love Mr. Bean. I love him so much.
Wholesome.
wholesome, unlike Pedro López, who is creepily just like sneaking looks at this little girl. And like at this point, he doesn't even give a fuck that she knows.
Yeah, for sure.
He's looking at her. He's just keeping it away from the mom, right? Who's like busy working, going back and forth, doing shit. So this girl's kind of like isolated and just kind of like, what the fuck's going on right now? Over and over again, he repeated this, resisting his urges, just waiting for his chance, the opportunity he'd taken hundreds of times before. And while on any other day, Pedro's strange behavior would likely be brushed off, ignored as just another weirdo hanging around the plaza. This time, with word of Eva Jacome's death all over the news, Alicia's whispers about the strange man making her uncomfortable, staring at her, took a more menacing air as they reached the ears of her mother, Carlina.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hearing the fear in her voice, Carlina pretended to not see how infatuated Pedro was with her daughter. She waited until the time was right to take Alicia by the hand and leave their booth. They then made their way carefully around the market, going booth to booth, spreading word about the strange man to each of their fellow vendors.
Yes.
Soon, in a synchronized act, vendors from all around the market stepped out from behind their booths and began walking in the same direction. Shoppers stood around, baffled as the market turned into a confused but quiet panic. The broken rhythm, chatter, and atmosphere only found Pedro's attention just moments before he was surrounded by the vendors. He ran, but the crowd gave chase through the narrow aisles, barely managing to tackle Pedro just a few feet away from the edge of the market where he'd have access to the busy streets of Ambato. With his face down on the pavement and surrounded, they dragged him back into the market where they proceeded to, quote, interrogate him, end quote.
Yes, good.
But try as they might, Pedro played the victim. He just kept crying and pleading with them, saying, quote, I'm just a humble worker. I have a clean heart. No one bought the act. But as time passed and the vendors realized they wouldn't be able to get him to confess, they eventually decided to call the police, all the while keeping Pedro held down and surrounded while they waited.
Good.
Dude, this moment just sounds
Richard
fucking
Ramirez.
Yes, dude. They Richard Ramirez him. But like, can you just imagine that being a shopper in the market at the time where you're just like, yeah, I'll take 6 potatoes, and you're just like, what the fuck? And like everybody's just like they all and like this is like a fucking like football stadium size place. So it's
probably like
huge
100
market.
to 100, 200 people.
Yeah,
like 200 vendors,
dude.
Like
they fucking played it off so good.
Awesome.
Pedro's sitting there like, yeah, I got some padlocks. Like, why is everything quiet? Oh! Just like go fucking run.
Hopped on him, goes running. I'm so glad they got him. Well, at least they got him.
They like,
now.
They barely fucking got him. Like it was like, and like this is the capital of like a, what would essentially be like a state. Right? This is pretty
pretty big
busy
place.
area. Yeah. It's right in the center of downtown. If he would have slipped through, bro, like he could have gotten away.
Oh, he'd be gone. Yeah.
Well, once in custody, the police brought Pedro down to the station where, as stated in many later interviews by police who were there, they began torturing the shit out of him. Seriously, though, like the amount of times in interviews they just straight up said things like, quote, hours of forceful interrogation, end quote, made it really obvious they were fucking him up. Like,
yeah, and I'm sure nobody cared.
No.
To be fair. I'm sure they were just like, yeah, this is fine. This is no big deal.
No, and like we're watching this like years later during interviews. Some of these folks are still on the force. They're still, doing whatever occupation they were doing at the time back when this happened. And they're just like, yeah, after hours of forceful interrogation. I'm like, damn, y'all just saying that. Y'all ain't trying to hide shit.
Might be different rules in that area, especially for that person. And I'm sure that everybody just kind of like, yep, look the other way. We're just like, yeah, this guy that we think we found has been doing all of these things to kids. Let's just let this happen.
Yeah, and like definitely on a countrywide level later, nobody would give a fuck. Like just
for sure.
Nobody.
Yeah.
For more than just the joy it brings me that Pedro is getting his shit rocked, it's also an important point to keep in mind for how things will progress, because everyone present at the time eventually came to admit that their quote-unquote forceful interrogations didn't work, right? Like, so at this point, he's had the shit beaten out of him by a bunch of vendors. Right now, he's had the shit beaten out of him by a bunch of police. He ain't talking. He ain't saying shit. And I mean, like, let's be honest. He probably had worse beatings as a homeless 8-year-old in Bogota while he was, like, you know, digging through the trash for food or trying to find a place to sleep.
Yep.
Like, that's not going to work on him.
He was also raped twice in jail.
Yeah.
By two people in jail that, you know, probably wasn't, I mean, obviously it wasn't very good at all. So he's just like, this is fine. This is better than everything I've dealt with. You know?
I mean, he was, you know, raped as an 8-year-old, like shortly after arriving in Bogota, like on his own. And then in jail, you know, like, and like, had to join a gang, got the shit knocked out of him on a regular basis, I'm sure, was in regular knife fights.
Probably stabbed.
Yeah, like, people beating the shit out of him, that's just a Tuesday. You know, like, he could give a fuck less. So, as every police drama will tell you, when playing bad cop doesn't work, you gotta try good cop, right? Enter one Mr. Captain Pastor Cordova. Now, before we get to what likely happened, I have to address a few myths and mistranslations that are common in this part of the story. And this is, like, incredibly important. If you look up Pedro's case anywhere, you're probably going to find one of these versions. And to be honest, I think they're all bullshit. And there's a good reason why.
Yeah.
First, it's heavily reported that police captain Pastor Cordova went undercover as Pedro's cellmate for upwards of a month, like some kind of Colombian version of The Departed. During that time, Cordova carefully worked to gain Pedro's trust, ultimately coaxing out hundreds of disturbing confessions during the day, while left so horrified by what he had learned, he would sleep with a towel wrapped around his neck for protection at night. Like, he was, like, learning fucking horrible shit during the day and then having to sleep in the same cell as Pedro at night. And he was just like, fuck, what did I get into? Fuck, you know?
Yeah.
Well, another version of the story, the captain does all the same things, but is also disguised as a priest the whole time, making the constant process of Pedro giving confessions kind of more believable, more likely.
Oh my God, he was Saint Karen in the beginning.
Well, both of these variations make, you know, they really do make for great stories. I think both are completely wrong. And here's why. If we step back real quick and think about these narratives, they don't make any sense. First off, I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say it'd be weird to see a priest in jail as a fellow prisoner. That's kind of fucking weird, you know, like, it literally in full, you know, drab and just kind of, what? It didn't make any fucking sense. Additionally, I think there's a really high chance people are confusing and or mistranslating the captain's first name as his spiritual occupation, accidentally turning Pastor Cordova into Pastor Cordova. Like, that was something I came across a bajillion times at Google Translate where I was like, wait, this isn't right. This isn't right. So it's something that folks are actively mistranslating and reading this whole narrative as like, oh, Pastor Cordova, like, went in and did this.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening.
Well, the only way I could see that is if he was the pastor, he was the Catholic priest in the jail, and he would do confession with him. And that's the only way I could see that happening, but he wouldn't be in jail with him.
Yeah.
Because they would have that, especially in a South American prison. They would have, you know, you definitely confess. But I don't feel like he would care or tell because he already feels like he's been blessed by God to do this. So why does he need to tell anymore? You know? Because he was saved. So he's just like, well, unless he felt like that this pastor was going to be like, all right, oh, he's fine. He's fine. Get him out of jail. You know, like,
dude, finally, somebody that knows what I've been doing and seeing how hard I've been working. Bro, let me tell you about all the shit I've done for God lately. Bro, you are not going to believe it. Just sit down, Father.
That one just came fresh from the Vatican. It was ready. They were ready to swap stories.
Yeah, but like,
but
like straight up, based off of how people refer to this moment and the captain later, he's not a priest. He was a captain. Like that's just like everybody refers to it because, like I was saying, all the folks that are just being like, enhanced interrogation and yada, 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 or like intense interrogation, blah, blah, blah. They're all talking about it in reference to what did work. And every one of their stories points to Captain Pastor Cordova and what he does, right? And all of them refer to him as Captain. All of them refer to him giving them orders. All of them. It lines up. It makes sense like really quick. Well, I think there's a huge issue with just folks, relying on Google Translate and not actually trying to like look at the words that are being translated sometimes. And they might be accidentally, reading Pastor Cordova as Pastor Cordova. Now, taking all that a step further, we really have to ask ourselves, why the hell would anyone sleep with a towel wrapped around their neck when they're afraid of being strangled? Like, seriously, step back and think about that for just one moment. Like, I mean...
That's not the first thing I do.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I could understand if you were afraid of being stabbed in the neck, right? Like, you might be like, yeah, I need to wrap something around my neck, But you wouldn't sleep behind a car because you're afraid of getting run over, right? So, like, why on earth would you volunteer a noose to a strangler?
Yep.
All of the stories where they say that he was so frightened and he was so scared and he was wrapping a towel around his neck at night as he was barely holding on to his sanity. The fuck? Why would you... What? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense from the beginning. I mean, I'm trying to reconcile it being with something that makes him a little more comfortable to hold himself together, but still, like, yeah, you're right. That person could literally just be like, oh, grabbing the towel, choking you out now. It's easy. I don't even have to grab you by my hands, which is a lot harder. I can just grab, if you're holding the towel, I can grab around you and hold the towel, choke you while I'm holding your arms too. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. That sounds very far-fetched.
It does sound far-fetched, but like, keeping it in mind in context of like how it's often come across, or at least how I've often come across it, it's just kind of something that's just put in there as like, oh man, look at how scared he was, and it's built on top of a lot of other things. But when you cut back all the fluff and you actually just look at the context, like look at the content, and the context of the situation is just kind of like, it makes no fucking sense. Like, he was dressed as a pastor and he was and he's sleeping with a fucking what? Like, this is bullshit. Well, so yeah, if we throw out all those parts of the story and keep the rest, we're now supposed to believe that the police captain, who at the drop of a dime took an entire month off of work to go undercover in a jail filled with people who would recognize him and probably not be his biggest fans. That's
the first thing I thought. I was just like, they would literally know who this guy is. It's not like he goes in there and like puts on a little mustache and it's like, with like a French accent. Yeah.
I am Pastor.
And there's like, who is this guy? He looks familiar. I know who that guy is.
Brother.
That's our pastor.
Pastor. Yeah, like again, the whole thing falls apart when you actually just kind of apply some basic scrutiny to it. It's just like, okay, he did not do that. He did not do that. By common sense, we can throw out the B-movie version of The Departed, right? We just toss that out. Which, after that gets tossed out, it leaves us with the question as to why these are common stories. Well, when you look into the podcast and blog posts claiming these various confession scenarios, the sources are either A, non-existent, or B, the references are circular, meaning they quote a Medium article that's quoting Pedro's Wikipedia page, which is quoting the exact same Medium article, and like so on and so forth, and just keep circling around. You're like, wait, this is just a reference loop. Like, everybody's making shit up right now. Like, there's no basis to this.
It's literally the circle jerk of references.
Yeah, which is like, goddamn. This was a major one.
Yeah.
Last time I came across one that was this bad was probably like the Georgia Guidestones episode, where like everybody was just saying,
oh yeah,
everybody's just like, we have absolutely no idea, no basis, no concept for why he built these stones. And then you actually look into it and you're like, wait, he wrote a book and he gave it to everybody for free. He sent it to every congressman and representative across the country. It's online. Like, it's just...
I mean, you can literally look at the stones and read them and be like, oh, we know why he wrote these stones. Because, first off, he's probably genocidal and he's super racist.
Oh, yeah, no.
In the general sense,
100%.
Like, even though he tried to write it out in eight different... Yeah, I think it's 8 different languages. It's just like, why why?
Yeah.
Like these don't make sense.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any
Well,
sense.
you know, for the folks that were asking why, he wrote a huge ass book that explained every single one of his, like, you know, tenets that he had carved in the stone in great detail. And God damn it, if the common story hasn't been, we have no clue. Meaning has been lost to time. And I'm like, it was a quick Google search and the ebook came up.
And if you want to know what they said in it and all that stuff, go to episode 4. We have it on episode 4. That's our super early episode.
Damn, you found that fast as fuck. Hell
no,
yeah,
I
Joey.
just literally remember it's episode 4.
Damn, you're good. Damn, he's good.
Yeah.
This guy's good. Well, like I said, so everybody's just kind of doing this circle jerk of referencing each other. Nobody actually has any real, you know, I guess like substantive, like kind of like sourcing to what they're saying.
There's no lotion.
Yeah.
There's
no lotion, just all dry. Well, from there, everybody's just kind of quoting one of those two. So what really happened? Well, it was simple, not as dramatic, has witnesses, and honestly makes a lot more sense. According to Dr. Rothman Rios, the police department's medical examiner who was interviewed in the A&E biography about Pedro López, after the police tried unsuccessfully to torture a confession out of Pedro for hours, Captain Pastor Cordova stepped in and cleared everyone else out of the room. Dr. Rothman then stated Cordova proceeded to do what he referred to as a process of trying to gain Pedro's trust. Very
the
simply.
first thing he did?
What?
He came in with a Coke and he was like, dude, to be fair, if I was getting tortured and the first thing someone came in with like a Mexican bottled Coke and just put it down, I'd be like, I'll tell you anything you want to know.
I'll edit that out for posterity's sake later. But we don't need the feds knowing that. Look, dude, you know shit about me. You can't tell them.
Yeah,
this.
true.
Yeah, dude.
It's fine. I'll just leave. I'm gone.
Okay. I'll use AI to change that too. They just gotta come in with a bottle of Pepsi, and then blah blah blah.
There you go. There you
We'll
go.
never
Oh
know.
God, don't even mention Pepsi in here.
Exactly.
We don't want to talk
them
about
to know.
Pepsi
Anyways,
in here. No.
In other words, he was nice to Pedro, right? Which, like, knowing, you know, his childhood, where he came from, what he's gone through, all this other shit like that, kind of a big deal, right? Like that's a huge thing for somebody who is in, I guess you would say, like, established society, to be nice to him.
Yeah. This is the second person to be nice to
Yeah,
him.
the last time it was that American family who, like, grabbed him up off the streets and were like, we're gonna put you in school. Like, I think it was the last time. Well, then there was Saint Karen, but that was like
Karen. Sorry, third time.
She was more focused on herself. She didn't really give a fuck about Pedro.
That's still nice. I mean, he got saved from being killed. So.
Pretty confused.
Well, I feel like he thought that was more God than her.
Yeah,
so,
well, she did too.
Which is a weird thing.
Yeah.
Well,
she 100% did. God.
Hence the saint.
God, I hate her. Anyways, instead of just beating the shit out of him, right? He listened. He asked Pedro about himself. He started to build a relationship with Pedro. Not hard to do because nobody would fucking talk to him. And I'm not trying to, like, pity party Pedro. I'm just trying to say, like, this was an easy in for Cordova, right?
For sure.
And based on what almost everyone agrees happens later, simply being nice and developing a relationship explains a lot and makes way more sense. That's a little teaser, a little spoiler. But before we get there, we got a confession to get to. Now, within only a matter of hours, Pedro was telling Captain Cordova everything, ultimately confessing to the nearly decade of bloodshed and evil he'd brought to cities in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. In what was later noted as an almost photographic ability to remember his victims, Pedro was able to give in great detail the appearance of each little girl, where they were, what they were wearing, and what he did to them. He was like an encyclopedia of raped and murdered little girls, like going up to like 350 pages. He was just like, oh yeah, and then this one, oh yeah, and then this one. He was just running through it.
Yeah, that's horrible too. And I guess he also remembered too because he'd pick them out of their grave and they're still wearing the same thing when he had his tea parties with them, which is just like horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Batman also had an eidetic memory.
Well,
Just saying.
Unsurprisingly, almost immediately, the raw shock and magnitude of this confession spread past the interrogation room and spilled into the media, turning Pedro into the most hated celebrity overnight. Like, some tea like this, the police, the guards, whoever the fuck standing outside of the room, they talked immediately. Like, holy fuck, how many people did he kill too? Did you hear about this? Like, that shit spread.
Damn.
This is...
Damn, hold your horses, John Mayer. Jeez, I mean, come on.
But seriously though, like, you know, we're looking at these numbers today, like 40 years later, however long, and we're just like, holy fuck, that's a lot. Like, dude, this is light years past anybody that was known on the planet in terms of
And
what.
still today.
Like still to this day, it's like, holy shit. What was it? I think it was like John Wayne Gacy. It was like 33 victims.
Yeah, there's no one close.
No, we're fucking close, you know? And so, like, you're hearing this shit, and you're like, wait, how many did he confess? You think he did it?
Yeah.
Wait, whoa, you think he did it? Holy shit. Like, people are freaking
Like all of them, too? Yeah, sure.
5 seconds flat, this shit was in the media. Well, this is an incredibly important moment for a few reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was then, in this exact moment, when the interview requests began pouring in that Pedro's ego took hold. Up until this point, he was a nobody and honestly didn't care to be somebody, right? He learned basically to negotiate with risk, negotiate with his own ego, right? He didn't want to raise too much of an awareness. He didn't want to become somebody because the last time he became somebody in Ayachucho, like, didn't really work out well for him. Like, a divine miracle had to fucking save him, right? Like, more or less.
Well, I do think this is a lot what makes it, at least at this point, this is a lot of what makes him able to have killed so many.
Exactly.
That's different than other serial killers, because most serial killers have even we're in the 60s and 70s now, right?
Yeah.
At this point, is like at that time, most of the serial killers, they were all looking for notoriety. Yep. And then when they didn't get it, they sought after notoriety, and that's when they got caught.
Yep.
And so I feel like now he's getting to that point of ego, like you're saying, is starting to be like, oh, maybe I should say something and make my head grow that I'm this great thing. And now,
well, first time he's really getting attention in life, just straight up.
Mm-hmm.
He learned how to survive by not raising attention, by not raising awareness of his presence. That was the only way he could survive as like a fucking 8-year-old out there in the world. Even when, he was in the room while his mom was like servicing her clients, he was taught not to raise awareness, to not be there, to not, like, this is something super instilled in him, right? Like, don't stand out, don't be present. Hopefully nobody looks at you. The only time folks look at you is when something bad happens, right? But now all of a sudden it's just like, wait, I can be somebody? Okay. And now I'm pointing this out. I'm kind of going on a tirade here, or a tangent, because, like, really when you stop to think about it, and this kind of builds up towards later, there had been no active searches for an individual behind all the missing children that Pedro was confessing to have killed at this point. Like, most of these police departments fucking forgot that there were ever reports to begin with, right?
Yep.
And Pedro's sitting there like, oh yeah, this person. So in some ways, there's a little bit of proof to all of these folks being his victims, because him and the victims' families are the only ones that remember, right?
Which is real shitty too now, because now the police are just like, but are they real?
Yeah, and so at this point in time, like up until the past few months, the very most, police were just barely starting to accept the idea of a single suspect. They weren't even like at that point yet. They were just like, well, we found these bodies over here, but maybe the same person did it. Like, they were super early days of that. And one who was maybe responsible at most for some, but not all of the local girls who had disappeared in Ambato, right? So, like, again, they ignored folks like who was it? Like Eva's father, who like came up and was just like, hey, she's missing. She sells newspapers. She was doing bad in school anyways. He's like, how do you know her grades? Like, yeah, get the fuck out of here.
Just the leopards.
Brushed him.
No big deal.
They just like brushed him off though, and they were just like, yeah, it was leopards and bad grades, get
Pythons.
anything in
here.
this day and age. Well,
Yeah.
I say all this because while in the background, Pedro was never leaving a calling card or trying to gain notoriety. He never showed any concern with making a name for himself. Like you were saying, like a lot of other serial killers were just like, I'm going to leave a puzzle piece. Or they're like, I'm going to make a weird fucking symbol. Or I'm going to keep teasing the police with fucking letters and not realize I'm putting my fingerprints all over it. Like they were all trying to do that kind of shit. Pedro was just like, la la la, tea parties. Like
all he was just leaving was just little trench coats everywhere he was. He just kept leaving a trench coat
keeps
over top
leaving
of him every
padlocks
time.
everywhere. I keep stubbing my goddamn toes.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, so Pedro was never trying to do that. He was like very hard and fast in terms of like not making a scene, not making an appearance, everybody forgetting who the fuck he was, but also very quickly being able to be known by everybody, but just the right folks. Like that was his expertise. Well, with all that said, I think that if he wanted a social ego boost, right, he would have picked victims he knew would gain attention.
Yeah.
Right? So, and with all that said, there is proof. His victims were not actually his preference. So it wasn't just that he like really, really, really like hated indigenous like little girls, right? And it wasn't that he really, really loved indigenous like little girls, right? From like both of which from like typically lower and like poorer classes in these regions. That was not it at all. To quote him, I often followed tourist families wanting to take their beautiful blonde daughters, but I never got the chance. Their parents were too watchful.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. They're used to that,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if it's in the 50s or 60s and 70s, if you're in another country, no matter like how early it is, you're always going to be watchful. If you're coming to another place, you're going to be way more watchful because you don't know the area. And if you also don't know the language too, that's a thing to where you most of the time you're going to be way more watchful with kids. But people who live there, like we're saying, it's fine. They'll just run the backyards. They'll just run. They know the area. They know the people. People will look after them. It's no big deal.
Yeah, but like that coupled with the fact that he would stalk them sometimes for days, I guarantee you, at some point, the mother and father are turned around at the bar by the pool and they're getting a drink and the little girl is just fucking like running along the side and he could have like grabbed them up. Some fucking like horror scene-esque like type of scenario. Like,
yep.
But this shows, A, he wanted to. I mean, he straight up says wanted to, wanted to take their beautiful blonde daughters. But like, B, he was in control of his impulses because he was aware of what the fuck doing something like that would bring, right? Like he was fully fucking aware, which tells me he knew where the line was for attention. Like he wasn't just a madman out here doing shit. He was very calculating and very intentional his whole damn process.
Premeditated.
Yeah. And like down to, like I said in like, I think it was like part 1, like into the communities that he picked, right? He was limiting himself to only have specific like targets where he would have free reign and not have to worry about his impulses. He's like, I'll go here and I'll do it like this because then I don't have to fucking worry about it because the only people to hang out down here are fucking poor and the police and the media. Nobody pays attention to him. Like he was so fucking intentional. And this is about, I guess, like point in his character is about to build up as the conclusion of his story develops here, right?
Yeah.
And I say this because the last testimony we should trust to be truthful is the serial killers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like just across the fucking board. Often they play to the police and media as, they're purely innocent until they see an advantage or power in an attention to their evil. At that point, they start increasing how sensational they can be, raising the victim count as they negotiate privileges and bait the press into book deals and all sorts of other shit, right? So, like, at first they're like, I didn't do it. I was... And then they see, like, oh, wow, I'm getting special privileges. Oh, like, I don't even know if in their mind they're realizing, like, no, I'm never getting out of jail. They're just kind of like, oh, shit, cool, I'm better off.
I can get more.
They're fucking sociopaths.
Yep.
So, like, they're just going for whatever the quick advantage is in that situation. That's what they're built towards. And this is important in a situation like this because we're talking about somebody who's claiming to have killed hundreds of people, right? So if we're going to validate that, right, and not just be like, like some of these other like American serial killers are like, no, maybe it was 60, maybe it was 100, like they all, as they were in jail, they were all like kept upping their numbers, right?
Yeah.
But if we're going to validate Pedro López as being the total diabolical piece of shit that he is, we have to pay attention to the point of like, when could those numbers have started to become exaggerated?
Yeah.
And in Pedro's case, I don't think he was lying about how many people were his victims at the time of his original confession, when it was just him and Captain Cordova in the room. That was fresh. That was new. He was just starting to open up and talk to him. I really don't think he was lying about that. I think later on,
there wasn't any ulterior motive at that moment to lie about it. He just was just like, someone's nice to me. I guess I can tell the truth.
Yeah. And like,
maybe I'll get out of this.
This is,
maybe I'll still get out of this.
Maybe I have a chance. But no, like in a fucked up way, I don't think he was used enough to that type of a situation to know how to manipulate it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like,
I mean, it does.
Yeah.
It does make sense that because I don't know if he's really the manipulator. He's more, he takes advantage of the situations of other people, but I don't know if he really manipulated anybody at this moment. At least in the stories that we've heard, he could have when he was younger. It doesn't seem like he was like really the biggest ringleader of anything. I feel like and I think he was just part of a gang when he was young. He wasn't like, oh, yeah, boys stabbing other people. Like, he wasn't the leader of the group doing this stuff. And so I feel like the manipulation wouldn't have grown maybe until later after he's seen more, you know? I feel like he's just kind of going along with what he gets.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. And yeah, like to kind of go back to a point that you made a little bit ago, like, I just don't think that he could have killed so many people while also trying to gain a reputation, right? Like he knew better, at least in my mind, going across all this, like he's shown me that he knew better, right? And he kept his impulses in check and was careful not to let his own ego sink him. He was very careful about that, right? He could have fucking left his mass graves to be exposed. He could have done so many things, right? So many things that a lot of other like serial killers have messed up on and gotten caught for, and he didn't do it, which shows like a high level of proficiency and like thought behind it, just straight up. Well, the press began referring to Pedro as the monster of the Andes. The police began to grow skeptical, right? So naturally, they didn't want to believe a monster like this could have been operating under their noses for so long and to such an extent.
Yeah, they believe that. They say that we've done a very, 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 very bad job. We have done a terrible job of being police. So if they gave that credence, just like when police in the U.S. are just like, we don't have a serial killer, it's just one. Yeah. They just kill one person, we're going to get him. But then it starts happening, and it's more of like societal pressure than anything is being pushed on the police to find it. For the most part, there have been some incidents where cops from the beginning have been chasing this person. Yeah. But if it is one murder, technically it's not a serial killer till there's more of the same motives. Yeah. So it's just like it is hard to label that if unless you see more than one body of the same MO.
And that's 100% true, but you also have to keep in mind that like the claims that Pedro is making, that they're all very well aware of, which is that hundreds. Sure. Like at a certain point, those numbers go past, well, you could have slipped up, well, you could have not heard about it till like,
nope,
bro. Like this is, there's only, 200 people on your entire police force. Like that's more than the amount of people in your entire police, like it's just like it's such an insane amount of numbers, just numbers wise, that it's just like there is no salvation in that situation. It's just like either this dude's fucking lying or like we really fucked up.
Yep.
And even from a certain administrative angle, if he's lying and this shit get out to the press and now they're having to answer questions about it, that's still a fucked up. They're fucked. Like they're 100% fucked, right? Like almost in a Joachim Kroll kind of situation, but like without the forced Forrest Gump kind of like leading them through shit. It's like that,
Yeah,
but this
yeah.
person actually has like a degree of intelligence and foresight, right? Pedro does.
Yep. Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So the public was, rightfully so, absolutely outraged, right? Like, not just with Pedro, but with the institutional failure that he represented. And so, in a move to settle the tensions on all sides, the police began getting Pedro to prove his claims, to reveal to them the graves of the monster of the Andes. It was a gamble they quickly regretted when their first stop revealed the newspaper-covered remains of Hortensia Garces Lozada, the little girl whose father was brushed off and case-labeled as just another example of a poor kid failing in school and running away. Literally, first stop.
Yeah.
Like, did not look good for the police at that point, because guess what
Not
the
at all,
media did
no.
while they're on a hot beat? They went straight
asked
to the
him.
parents, and
Yep.
they were like, hey, so
Yep.
did you report this? And he's like, yes, I tried, and they told me this.
Okay, so now seeing this, I want to retract my answer about him not being a manipulator.
That's
Yep.
a good thing to retract here.
Because he just went back and just was like, now that I've said these things, led you here, I already know that you didn't research into these things because I was free. And he told those people about him. Or literally the first person is the person that he knew that they didn't look into and that he knew they would be screwed because of
Memory
it.
was fresh, too. This was like only months earlier. Like, literally, just a few months earlier.
He manipulated me, too.
Damn it, he's good. Well, soon detectives and police were spending every day driving Pedro around the entire country, where over and over and over again, he was leading them directly to mass graves.
Damn.
This shit was bad.
Yeah. Mass graves is terrible, too, because they're actually people he killed.
Yeah. And at each one, Pedro, with his near photographic memory, would begin spouting off descriptions of the little girls, as well as the exact dates, times, and locations of where he took them from. All of the notes the police should have been keeping over the years, he was just like, yeah, and then there was this, and there was this date, and I picked her up here, and she was near a mom that looked like this, and like he just boom, 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 just started like going down the line.
Damn.
Right?
Yeah. This reminds me of like Henry Lucas. When Henry Lucas would be like, I think I buried the body out there, and he'd take these people out there, except it's actually true.
Yeah.
Because he killed these people. They're actually finding all these bodies, not just like, dig over there. Oh, wait, I think it was over there. Oh, no, it was over there. I want that burger.
I remember now. It was at your mom's house. Yeah. But no,
But seriously.
But yeah, with Pedro, like, they were, like, you have to picture this. They were driving across the entire fucking country. Like, this was not just, like, within their jurisdiction. Are you looking up how big Ecuador is?
I am. Thank you. You
Oh,
already
you
knew
my
what
man.
I'm doing. It's actually it's not too big. I mean, it's still hours long, obviously, because it's...
Okay, but you're not picturing the mountains in Ecuador?
True, the Andean mountains.
Yes.
is
Okay. Because, like, please look up some photographs you want to picture driving across those. Like, not exactly the easiest route. Yeah.
Damn.
Soon detectives and police were spending every day driving Pedro around the country, where over and over he was leading them directly to mass graves.
Yep.
Yeah, so this went on for 6 weeks. Every single day for 6 weeks. They were loading up into the vans and into the cars and driving around in the country to wherever the hell Pedro said that they should go to, pulling out bodies.
That is awful.
And as news spread, crowds of people began waiting outside of the jail each morning for Pedro, throwing rocks and trying to bust through police lines so they could lynch him. Like, people were not fucking happy about this.
Yeah.
Very pissed. And like I said, part of it is like pissed at the institution, but also majority pissed at fucking Pedro. They were like, what? The literal...
For sure.
The amount of video...
Yeah.
Almost all of the videos that you can find of Pedro at some point are going to include crowds of people surrounding him in this moment when they're throwing rocks, trying to throw fucking bricks. People are trying to bust through police lines every fucking morning for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, This is intense, right?
Yep.
It eventually got so bad that cops resorted to dressing Pedro up as a police officer and sneaking him out when people weren't looking. Like,
Ooh.
literally, head to toe, dressed as a cop. And I can imagine Pedro's like goofy ass, like just fucking going along with it. Like,
You know, he's probably just like, I always wanted to be a police officer.
you know, my mom, who I hate, said I would be a good cop. Like,
Yeah, damn, this is fucked.
well, these disguises, along with how they had to treat Pedro in order to get him to cooperate, led to some very strange photographs on their field trips. You see, this whole time they were giving him cigarettes, coffee, good food,
Uh-huh.
alcohol, and just anything they could think of or he asked for to keep him talking. Like, their orders were...
Good behavior.
Yeah, well, their orders were like, we need to, reconcile. We need to, find every single one of these victims. Like, that was the official
Yep.
orders from the
Oh, yeah.
very, very, very top of the force at first. And so, like, to the cops' knowledge, just like, well, he's asking for beer. We'll give him beer. So,
Yeah.
so basically, this means that, like, there's a bunch of incidences where while they're at these mass graves, Pedro is dressed up as a cop, hopping into pits and piles of bones where he would casually talk through, and I mean in a very cold way, the details, and try to pose with victim skulls anytime the press snuck up to, like, take a photo. Like, do you remember with Joachim Kroll when, like, the press was hiding and
Yeah.
shit? And, like, at first it was kind of like, oh no, the press is there. But then eventually they were actually, get the fuck away because we're looking bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in this situation, Pedro, who's, like, visibly drunk, smoking cigarettes and shit like that, probably shirt half untucked, dressed like a cop, next to all the other cops, is like...
Probably also smoking cigarettes and drinking some of the beer, too. Just
So, like,
having a good old boy time.
this is a PR nightmare, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Oh, for sure.
well, I want to emphasize here, like, I said the word try to because at some point between the confession and the field trips, Pedro started referring to Captain Pastor Cordova as Papa.
Oh.
Yup. Heard a lot of psychologists go
horrible.
into long rants about that one. And y'all can imagine it's all pretty straightforward on that.
Yeah.
Well, obviously this weirded everyone out, right? Like, everyone on the force, all the folks that were below him, and they were just like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? But no one would acknowledge it because they were all told to play along. So this
For sure. Yeah.
this fucking monster, drunk as fuck, dressed like one of them, just chain smoking, eating whatever the fuck you want, calling the police captain Papa in front of everyone.
Yeah, no, that's so fucking
This is
weird.
weird. Right?
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Shit just got out of hand. Like, it's just like,
Yeah. Oh, this just got out of hand
Just
real,
now.
real fast.
only now.
Yeah.
It just got out of
Yeah,
hand.
just got out of hand. Yeah, none of the before
No,
stuff ever got
Totally
out of
in
hand.
control.
No,
Totally cool.
no, he wasn't murdering hundreds
Uh-uh.
of little girls. No big
Everything's
deal.
all right. Well,
Yeah.
in total, out of the 110 people he confessed to killing in Ecuador, Pedro would reveal the remains of somewhere between 57 to 74 victims before the police simply gave up going on their daily trips.
I mean, yeah. I do feel like at the point, if you're not even able to identify the bodies either,
Yeah.
like it does suck. It's just like you're just adding to his life. You're adding to this love that he already had. Because he's reliving these moments. Like, as you're saying, he's drunk, he's smoking cigarettes, he's probably like hamming it up, he's laughing it up, like,
Dude.
just remembering these little girls, just as he was doing the awful things. And I can't imagine, like, honestly, if I was another cop there, I'd be so sickened because it's like,
Yeah.
you have to go find some of these people.
Yeah.
And I know that, like, one of your directive is to keep them talking, help finding these people. But how sickened would you be if you were with this guy who probably, in most all odds, was taking so much joy in this because he's now being looked at as, like, he has a dad. That's how he feels. He has a dad that's giving him stuff that he never had, and making him feel comfortable, which I think is really the most important part. The guy is just making him feel comfortable, which he's technically just doing his job. He's trying to get all this information from him.
But the pleasure
I would be so sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pleasure is just, it would be so sickening. You know, I would imagine that most of the time they probably thought about doing the same thing that the first people did, the indigenous people in Peru, and just burying him, being like, I don't know, he escaped.
Must have been quicksand.
And just let him must be in quicksand, and just let him die, get eaten by ants, you know? Like, ugh.
This is a perfect example of a quote that I read 100 times that I didn't write down, that I should have wrote down. But what you hit on a point there when you said that, like, you know, at first it was like this, then it transitioned to like this. Like, there was a cop who straight up said, and it's widely quoted, something to the tune of, like, you know, when somebody tells you that they've killed 300, 350 people, at first you don't believe them. But after the 50th, 60th, 70th body he shows you, you don't need to see anymore. You know that they're telling the truth. Like, it was something, I'm paraphrasing there, but basically, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what the police were experiencing. They were like, bro, at a point, it was just like, we don't need to keep fucking doing this. Like, we know he's telling the truth when he's saying this shit.
Yeah.
And, like,
I mean, even if he didn't kill 300 people, you're still at 50 to 70
you're still
bodies.
Way the
You know,
fuck
you're still way high up there. So even if he's just like, no, let's keep going out, you're just like, I am okay.
Yeah.
Like, we got what we need, as sad as it is.
We fucking get it.
And they're not, and I feel like in a lot of this, they're not providing closure for anybody, because I feel like a lot of the bodies weren't being ID'd.
Institution was completely fucked, and they weren't paying attention, and da-da-da-da-da.
Exactly.
And how do you track some fucking beat cop who heard this as a complaint, you know, 20 years ago, and fucking
probably
ignored
doesn't
it?
even remember the exact name.
And just like, I don't know. They lived over there. Like, dude. And we're talking like bones.
Yeah.
Right. Like, at this point, like, they're just, you know.
Yeah. There's no DNA evidence right now, so no genetics. You can't find out who is who.
Yeah.
So it's like, at this point, it's not worth it.
You're
for
just
them to
building
keep
his
out.
legend. Like, at that point, at a certain point, you're not developing closure. You're developing his legend, right? Which you're watching every fucking day. Him just like bask in that shit and love it and eat it up.
He's glowing. Oh
my god! I specifically didn't do this on purpose, but there's a bunch of quotes by him where, yes, his ego fucking goes off the rails. Picture a cokehead like that, but just 24/7 about himself. He's like, I'm the most evil motherfucker in history. I'm pure terror. I'm a monster. Like, he's introducing himself as like, I'm the biggest monster that's ever lived. Like, he's loving it.
Each little girl that he sees and IDs to them is just basically a big line for him right off the, you know, and he's
first time in his fucking life he's gotten attention for anything, you know, and it turns out that his sick fucking obsession was what did it for him. So he just feels so good about it. Anyways, just as he picked his victims carefully, so too did he pick where he risked being arrested. You see, there was a strategic advantage to Pedro getting arrested in Ecuador. On July 31st, 1981, when 33-year-old Pedro López was charged and pleaded guilty to the murder of 57 girls, he was only sentenced to 16 years in prison. And while the country was left in shock, Pedro was anything but surprised, saying in later interviews that, unlike in Colombia, where he would have faced the firing squad, in Ecuador, the maximum sentence anyone could get for anything was 16 years. And further, if you were arrested and multiple charges were issued against you, you couldn't be charged separately.
Yep.
Meaning all 57 murders were one big crime with a maximum punishment of 16 years.
I was about to say, how horrible and how long would that trial have been if they had to do each charge separately? But since it's only one charge, technically, for all of the crimes and 16 years, I think a lot of those police in there were just sitting there like, he might accidentally drive him over the border to Colombia.
Should have threw him in a ditch.
Yep. Oops. Well, you know, he just went missing. But like, I can't believe that. I mean, sometimes, you know, you hear stories about about things like that in the U.S. too, where people will get 2 years,
Yeah.
for horrible acts. But the idea behind it is it happened one time there. Yeah, it's terrible, but he's got 57 to more
Oh yeah.
acts against him, and it's like he still only gets that one charge.
Which goes to also show you that like he was trying to get every possible thing on the books when they were going out every day. Again, he was pushing an honesty agenda because that was to his advantage. If he gets released
it didn't
in
matter.
16 years and then they, tie some breadcrumbs together and form a case and then charge him with it, that's another 16 years. But since it was all at once, Max was 16. He wanted them to find everything. He was trying his fucking best.
I would have. Okay, he tricked me for good. He really tricked me in this. The story tricked me because now he's like
maniacal.
I was like, he's just some dumb kid, not searching for anything. But now I'm just like, dude, this dude is fucked. He planned all this shit. What an asshole. Honestly.
Well, yes, but like also like, he
manipulator.
He grew up in the streets. Like he went to jail.
Yeah. Well, he knew how to bend the laws.
Yeah, like, but he also like, he went to jail when he was like, what was it, like in his like early 20s. He's been dealing with shit and bending the laws and living on the fringes of society literally his whole life. Motherfucker knows the laws. Like he knows the laws and he knows what to do and what to avoid. Just like he knows what targets to pick and what targets to avoid. Even if he really, really, really wants those targets he's supposed to avoid, he still avoids them. He's super like calculating. That's the best way I can fucking put it.
Calculated.
Super but I don't think he's a genius at the same time, right? Like I mean, this is like, in a country where it's like the maximum penalty 16 years, everybody knows that because they've been seeing, like kingpins and these people and evil people and da-da-da-da-da. They're just like, well, you got the maximum of 16 years. Like that shit's in the newspaper. There's big time criminals being charged all the time and it's making the news. I'm sure he came across it and was like, okay.
Maximum.
Yeah.
I think of him as like a TI-83 calculator comparative to
Texas
like
Instrument.
the other maniacal geniuses, like being like a supercomputer or something like that. I feel like he's a TI-83, very calculated, can do,
basic
can move
formulas
within the system. Yeah, can make formulas, move within the system, keeps it going, but he doesn't like, it's not inventing new crazy things. He's just moving within the system.
Well, I just think that it's somebody who like, if this was your only day job, you would probably get this good after a few years.
Well, he was also selling like padlocks and stuff at his
the
coat,
tough
but,
life
like,
of a padlock salesman. I don't have a key. Shut up. I don't give refunds. Like I'm sure he didn't have that hard of a time. I'm just saying like
no.
This was his fucking thing. This was his passion. The only thing that he did in life. I don't think knowing these laws, these loopholes, and again, like we already know that he picked his areas where he targeted folks very intentionally. I don't think that as he traveled around finding out in Ecuador, like Max was 16 and that if they could get all lump summed, it would be to his advantage. I'm pretty sure he picked that. He's like, ooh, even better. I really, but I don't think he was a genius. I think in hindsight, it's like, damn it, he got us. And it's like, but like, this is some shitty piece together because he had so much fucking time to do it.
Yeah. Well, some people's passion project are working at soup kitchens, working, doing Habitat for Humanity, maybe even playing music, just passion projects. And his is killing and raping little girls.
Well, in total, this amounted to 4 months per victim. Wow. Bro, this is only based off of the 57 girls. This is not the amount that he confessed to within the country's borders. This is only the 57 that they were like, well, fuck, we actually found the bodies, da-da-da-da-da, this and that and the other. This is the safest charge. Again, when you're doing like an all or nothing kind of charge against somebody, you really need to make sure every single thing that you throw at them sticks. Yeah. Which means they were able to 100% with confidence say, 57 murders would stick 100% when they fucking, which is insane. Sure. Well,
that's so many.
So fucking many. And like I said, so amounted to 4 months per victim. Well, but wait, there's more. After 2 years in Ambato, he was transferred to a prison near Quito called Garcia Moreno, where he would ultimately serve out the rest of his sentence. It was here, in Quito, that as time went on, Pedro began claiming that it was never him that killed the girls. Oh, no. It was actually another person who was taking control of his body. Jorge Patiño. The Platicons. One example of this claim can be seen in a recorded interview where Pedro, grinning at the camera in a very uncomfortable way the whole fucking time, is asked by a reporter, "How many crimes did you commit, Pedro Alonso?" His answer, "I did not commit. I participated in the acts and was involved with them. He was threatening to kill me, and if I left him, he would kill me." Reporter, "But you said you're Jorge Patiño." "No, sir, I am not. I'm Pedro Alonso López, at your service."
Dang, what a bitch. Honestly, like what an asshole.
I might post that as
now
the
he's
Instagram
just, like,
reel,
he's
honestly.
separating. He's separating himself from, like, he's doing, now he's becoming the prototype serial killer. Like, literally, he started as, like, nothing, right? He started, like, he came from nothing. He's the real pull your bootstraps up kind of guy, you know? He's like, pull
Choke
yourself
him
up
by
your
your bootstraps kind of guy. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And now he's like, he slowly moved into manipulation because, I mean, he was working through it, but he moved into manipulation, got the praise, and now he's like, oh shit, I got all that praise, but now I got to blame it on somebody else, so it's not technically me that does it. So after 16 years, I can still go back out and be okay. Yeah, and keep myself under the microscope so people are still looking at me. God.
Enter in.
He's going somewhere.
Jorge Patiño.
Yeah. That's his sexy other self.
I'm sure he chuckled to himself when he got teen to fit in there. Maybe that was just me when I was writing out the pronunciation, but I was like, he fucking would. Well,
he would.
Naturally, statements like these, along with the horrible crimes and the degree of the amount of crimes that he committed, led officials to conduct a psychological evaluation on Pedro. And to no one but Jorge's surprise, Pedro was declared, among other things, a sociopath. Literally crickets at that point. It's just like, well, duh. But it wasn't all psych tests and interviews. Pedro also picked up some new hobbies and managed to reconnect with an old friend during his stay in prison, right? In a wing of the prison dedicated solely to rapists and murderers, Pedro spent his days mostly alone in his cell, where he passed time drawing in a notebook and carving coins with Jesus on one side and the devil on the other. Now, as for his old friend, well, their name is Basuco, and Pedro had a limitless supply to smoke during his arts and crafts time. Sadly, though, this time would be cut short. You see, because on August 31st, 1994, at 45 years old, Pedro López was released from prison a full 2 years early on account of his good behavior. He only served 14 years, just 94 days per person.
No, it wasn't him. That was Jorge.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't Pedro.
Remember what you told yourself moments ago about how he tricked you? I think he might have just done it again.
No, that was Jorge. I don't believe he's manipulative anymore. I feel like he just...
I can send you the script if you need to read ahead. Are you...
No.
I know you drove a lot.
Keep going. Keep going. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
You just want to hear him be exonerated and Jorge get taken down at this point, don't you?
Yes, please take down Jorge. God, every time an innocent man goes to jail.
I'm so glad you never became a cop. All right, well.
Yeah, pretty much. Firefighter, though. Would have been a little easier.
There's a baby inside.
I'll get it.
It's pointing to a pregnant lady. Well, I'll get it.
She's
Let me
already
get my
safe.
letter.
She's fine.
Wow,
I
wow,
gotcha.
wow, wow.
It's not a 70s porn. Get out of here, Joey. What?
Huh? Johnson.
Huh? Johnson.
All right. Well,
Jorge.
Jorge. News of his early release spread quickly and reached the ears of his victims' families. Well, already enraged by the disproportionately light sentence, the idea that Pedro would get out early was, we'll just say, a little too much, right? Like, people
I'm sure.
already too fucking pissed about this guy. And as such, communities started to plan for what they would do next. Over and over again in interviews, I came across the same, I guess you would say, category of response, which was they were all planning to carry out their own forms of punishment. Calls were being made on a national level to request reform to the country's laws to not let him get released. They literally, people were debating and, arguing, like, can we make one fucking exception for literally one of the worst people in history? Is that okay? Is that okay? Like, I know you set this law and it's good and, judicial process and, like, yes, people should be reformed and yes, prisons and da-da-da-da-da. But, like, this guy over here, like, can we just forget about him? Leave him the fuck in there? Like, we all know how fucking terrible he is. He even admits to it.
Oops.
He wants to show us more. Like, can we just not this time? Yeah. Anyways, this shit picked up and just the couple days before he was officially released. Again, released fucking early on top of a 16-year sentence.
Yeah, even worse.
Like,
yep.
People were talking about hiring hitmen to go after him.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, no. Like, I think at one point, I did do the calculations. It didn't include it in the script. I guess, like, phrasing around this area didn't work, but now I'm stumbling through it. It was around, like, $35,000 or $40,000 in today's money that, like, a shit ton of these folks, again, victims' families, poor rungs of, like, society, right? They managed to pull around, like, $30,000, $40,000 together to hire a fucking hitman.
That's the one time that everybody's just like, we kind of like Hitman. It's the one time that everybody's like, I kind of would like to be in that video game called Hitman and learn how to do that.
You ruined Assassin's Creed last week. Please don't ruin Hitman this week.
Gotta go to all the games.
I swear to God, if you go after Spyro next week, I don't know.
I feel like that was on an earlier episode.
Make it episode 80. But
maybe
yeah,
not.
So multiple folks were hiring hitmen. The young girl who the newspaper, she was selling the newspapers and stuff. Her dad, Leonidas, he went out. He just straight up says in, like, the A&E, like, documentary, he was just like, my friends and I gathered wood to burn Pedro López. They were going to fucking tie him up and throw him on top of a fucking fire alive. And, like, his response later, and he remembered it, you could see it in his goddamn eyes, like, how vivid it was. He was just like, cops were surrounding me at the time of his release. And, like, if they weren't around me with their guns drawn and da-da-da-da-da, I would have fucking, like, he was like, I was going to fucking kill him. Like, everybody wanted to fucking murder this dude.
What you're saying is
he had a reasonable response.
It was him and about 300 other people standing with a huge circle of another force around him pointing weapons at him.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But then he got kicked down into a pit.
And his name is Leonidas, right? And his name is Leonidas, right? This dude should have had if he had gone in
what do you
there
think
with
the movie is
freaking
based
shields, Leonidas.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
King Leonidas.
Exactly. But yeah, so
he got this. I wish he would have just been like, you know what? I mean, it sounds bad to say this too, but, like, I wish, and some part of it would have just been like, I'll just take this one for the team. That would have been sad that had to happen.
Did not need
but
that.
Like, at least
I'm glad.
But this guy,
I can't speak for him in certain ways, but also, like, we have to admit, socially looking back at situations like this, it's a weird fucking time. Literally, nobody wants to be there, besides maybe Pedro. Nobody fucking wants to be there. All the police,
for sure.
All the police, and I'm not one to, if you listen to this show,
they wanted to kill him too. I'm sure they were ready to kill him. Yeah, they're ready to be like, oh, whoops, I tripped over something. Somebody has a shot at him.
Like
For
I
sure,
honestly
they were like
fucking
that.
believe part of the reason why the community raised so much money was not so much for the hitman. I mean, it was like an open bounty on Pedro. I think
Payoff.
it
Yep.
was like a fuck you amount of money where it's just like if you're a prison guard working in this country at the time in Ecuador and like you see that and you're in charge of taking care of Pedro,
Just look the other
you could
way.
straight up kill him, get fired, and still have enough money to retire and live happily. Like they were
Yep. Oh, for
like
sure.
the amount of like, dude, when you reading through the amount of like struggle that these folks were going through just to make ends meet, and the fact that they were able to
Yeah.
raise that much fucking money,
That's a lot.
whoa, like
Yeah.
So the degree, I say all this because like the degree to which Pedro had impacted the community, the families, everything like that, it was recognized in this moment.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
mm-hmm.
this also goes back to, episode 1 and 2, where it's like how much was being underreported that this is the amount of pressure it got to, right? Like, again, This is why, like, just kept bringing that up where I was like, bro, an intentional campaign of ignoring people because what this shit gets to, it didn't just get there overnight, right?
Yeah, no, it gets riotous.
Yeah. Honestly, they should have fucking rioted and ripped the bitch apart. But I digress. Videos of Pedro being released, smiling, and yelling into the sky, "Thank you, Lord," went basically the mid-1990s version of viral, leading to an immediate public outrage. This left Ecuadorian officials scrambling, naturally, looking for anything they could do to keep this monster off the streets and calm the public. Like, we're talking about like hours until his release, all this shit going on. He's just getting releases on 5 o'clock news. So the response was within 24 hours, Ecuador took Pedro to the border and handed him over directly to Colombian authorities as he was, in fact, an illegal immigrant in Ecuador.
There you go. That's what I figured they'd do too. It's just like, not our problem. Get on over
Wait
there.
Wait a fucking second.
They'll
He was
deal
never
with
supposed
him.
to be here to begin with. Get him out of there.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah,
Get him on
there's
over
video of like the exchange, obviously shit tons of people around throwing rocks and like, get the fuck out, da, 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 da. Like, but they were just like, well, I called this guy and this guy called this guy and this guy called this guy. And basically they set it up so that like Colombia knew, hey, this fucking monster is about to like be coming into your country. We need to get him the fuck out. Y'all need to figure out what the fuck to do with him. We've dealt with him to the extent of our laws, right? Well, with all that said, this led to a fairly odd situation playing out over the next few days, as Pedro had not technically been arrested or even charged with anything in Colombia, but also officials sure as hell weren't going to release him, let alone take their eyes off of him. Like, this is, like the difference between like northern Michigan and Canada. This is like right across the fucking border. They're like, oh no, we've been seeing this shit on the news. We ain't letting him fucking run around. Like, even if we have to break the law, ain't nobody gonna be mad at us. Like, they were all like, but what the fuck did we do? And da-da-da. And there's a bunch of... I came across a bunch of shit where he was just like stuck in a building, right? So like, more or less, for at least a little while, he was basically just living in a government office building, eating junk food and hanging out. That was it. They wouldn't let him leave. And they were just like, but we can't let him leave. But like, the fuck do we, what do we do with him?
Yeah, what do we do? Yeah, we can't throw him in jail.
Hadn't been charged with shit. Hadn't been arrested on anything. He was basically just evil in another country and got deported. And they were like, well, didn't do anything here that we know about, Well, like I said, so eventually officers pulled enough money together to get him a hotel room and post up guards. That was like a temporary solution. They're like, well, we got him out of the office, down at the Motel 6 down the street. We have guards posted up all around the fucking building with guns pointed at it.
Yep.
But this was all to buy time, though, right? So while Pedro was living off of candy and takeout, government officers were digging through cold cases for anything that matched his MO. And, surprise, surprise, ultimately, that led him to being charged with and convicted for the murder of a young girl some 15 years earlier in December of 1979. This landed him right back in prison, but this too would be a short stay. By 1995, Pedro was diagnosed by Colombian psychologists as legally insane, and As a result, Pedro was moved to the psychiatric wing of the prison. Personally, I think Jorge Patiño wasn't just a random act. I think that Pedro played this out in Ecuador for attention. I think that he was trying to do what would essentially amount to a dry run, a reference point for later psychologists to use before declaring him insane. Pedro knew the laws, and he knew that in Colombia, if you were declared insane, you wouldn't be A, executed, and B, held responsible for breaking the law.
Yep.
He
that was just
fucking
Jorge.
knew it. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Jorge. But they could go back to, 10 years ago, he claimed this, and there was all these reports, and it was on camera, and he was talking like this, and that was showing signs of that. He was fucking playing them. He planned this.
Yep.
Just like he fucking knew that if he had gotten arrested in Colombia, he would have faced the firing squad. He was
Very
planning
quickly.
this. He's like, eventually I'm going to get out. Fuck, I'm not a citizen here. What are they going to do? They're going to be really pissed. Probably going to send me back to Colombia. What can I do? They're going to shoot me there. I got it. Like,
Be insane.
I guarantee you, because there was no other reason why he went this like weird route with shit out of the blue when like he literally only got 16 years. Like, bro, there was no advantage at the time.
Yeah.
Well, while he was in the psych wing of the prison, he was known for regularly telling the doctors, quote, "The moment of death is enthralling and exciting. Someday, when I'm released, I will feel that moment again. I will be happy to kill again. It is my mission." But regardless of statements like these, in February of 1998, there was a reversal on Pedro's diagnosis. Apparently, Jorge Patiño hadn't come around in a while, and since he'd left, well, somehow, Pedro was able to convince the prison psychologist that he was 100% all good now, totally normal, and not crazy at all. And as a result of this reversal and $50 in bail, he was released from prison, as long as he gave them the pinky promise that he would regularly check in and continue his psychiatric treatment. He didn't. But he did go back to Español to visit his dear old mom. Once he made it to her house, he said, quote, "Kneel down in front of me so I can bless you." She said, "No, the child is supposed to do that." And after this awkward exchange, he said that he was there to get whatever he could of his inheritance. Keep in mind, his mom's house is about as big as a Home Depot shed and about as full as a brand new one. Well, when she said she didn't have anything, to look around at how poor she was, that all she had was a chair and a bed, Pedro scoffed and proceeded to take the chair and bed outside, where he ended up selling them both to a random lady, but not before telling his own mother that if no one buys them, he'll set them on fire. After this, he dipped out to a more rural area of the Colombian countryside. Since then, there have been plenty of sightings and rumors, but there's only been one official sighting of Pedro, when in 1999, when he renewed his Colombian citizenship card at the National Civil Registry. 3 years after that, in October of 2002, Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization, which coordinates cop stuff around the world, issued an advisory for Pedro López. The reason? Colombian authorities were searching for him after a young girl was found dead in Español, cause of death matching Pedro's MO perfectly. And 10 years later, in 2012, Pedro was named as a possible suspect in a homicide committed in Tijuana, Colombia. If he's still alive, he'd be 74 years old.
74 years fun today.
Exactly. And that's it. There is no beautiful, awesome, karmatic conclusion to this. I found Pedro López when researching serial killers that are still active. And he could technically totally still be alive.
He easily could still be doing stuff. It'd be even worse.
Yeah.
It could be even worse. I mean, he just could be more manipulative. He already went to jail for his crimes. And so now he can just be like, well, fuck it. I get to do what I want now.
Yeah. And we know that he can hide. We know that he's not clout chasing unless he's like in that very specific situation where he can, you know. I truly 100% believe, and I don't think it's like going out on a limb to say this, that somebody who's killed that many fucking people, right? Even if, let's just cut it back to the 57 he was convicted on, right? Like charged with, convicted of for. Somebody who's killed that many people kept killing.
Yeah, he just doesn't stop. You don't have to stop.
No.
Like, Jorge didn't just live his life, you know? He's just, I mean, his alter ego, his who he called his other self, I guess, in a matter of speaking, did not just leave. The urge to kill, who he used to say that killed, just doesn't leave him.
Yeah.
He's still doing this. He even said it himself, just like he said the first time he went to jail. He's like, I'm going to kill, I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And then he goes to jail again. He's, goes to 2 different jails, that are both just like, hey, you're fine, no big deal. And then he goes, well, I'm going to go kill again. And they're like, you're reformed. It's fine. No big deal.
Yeah. I think I would go out on a limb and I guess like based off his rates and like the rate of the amount of people that he killed, his active and then his like
not his hourly rates.
not his hourly rates.
People
No. His bazooka rates. But
Yes.
but no, like the amount of time that would pass in his average number of like victims in that time easily before he got too old to like actually strangle somebody or use something to strangle somebody, like which I would say like late 50s, mid 60s, somewhere around there would probably be when he'd be like, damn, but these hands don't clamp like they used to, like probably around 500 to 650 like people that he killed if he kept up at the same rate, which there is no reason to believe that he didn't. Like he easily doubled the amount of people that he murdered. I would be shocked if he didn't.
He at least 50%ed it. He at least got 50% of the amount of people, so he could be at 3. He could be at 400, 500 right now instead of like $1,000.
Yeah,
like that's still more than any serial. That's more than like 1,000 serial killers.
Yeah, and like we know how he responded to the first time he got caught, which was he got even better and spent almost a decade under the radar. Like that's the straight up truth. Is like when he made that mistake and settled down in a place and realized all the things that added up to him getting caught and getting put into bug jail, right? Like it was like 9.5 years before he was caught again.
Yeah,
like
he was smart about it, and I think he also planned his, like you're saying, I think he planned his catching to be caught by police instead of by people.
Yeah,
I mean, he was in a way, but like more law-abiding people that are going to be like, okay, we'll take him to the police instead of
well, he was
getting caught by.
He was in a capital of essentially what would be the equivalent here of like a state. Pretty big city, pretty decent size, as a hub for a lot of things. But like, I have no reason to believe, looking into him, into his case, into all the fucking shitty interviews I watched with him and stuff like that, that A, that he quit, and that B, that he didn't just get better. And that's just the honest truth.
At hiding. And
I think he
just
got fucking better at doing the fucking evil he was doing. And I just hope that someday we find his skeleton with just his skull sticking out of the ground somewhere in the jungle. That would make me, damn it, I would sleep so good that night. So fingers crossed to that.
Fingers crossed. Dude, to be fair, if I was getting tortured and the first thing someone came in with like a Mexican bottle Pepsi and just put it down, I'd be like, well, I'm gonna go kill again.